We want to demo to them as quickly as possible, onboard them as quickly as possible, quite naturally, I suppose. But we've learned, recently that it's probably better to be slower, spend a lot more time on the discovery, make sure we set proper sort of success criteria for a pilot.
Today, I'm very excited to be joined by Ed Grimes, the CEO and founder of Talent Unlimited. I'll let Ed introduce himself. Ed, could you tell us a bit about your background and tell us about Talent Unlimited?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I come from about a 30-year background in retail operations in the food sector. So I was joined Pret very early days when I had just 32 shops. Gives you an idea of how long ago that was. Spent 10 years there. The last 3 of those years, I was head of operations for all of our out of London sites. So anything from Brighton to Edinburgh. Basically, I then moved to what was then Pret's biggest competitor, Eat. As head of retail initially, then retail director for the last 9 years of my time there. And it was there that I met my co-founder, Ed Godwin, who he and I worked together for 10 years at Eat. He was the HR director and I was the retail director side by side. So we spent a lot of time transforming the culture of the business there, very much by focusing on how we treated our employees from coming into the business through the recruitment process through to working with us. How they were rewarded, recognized, upskilled, developed, and so on, knowing that the better job we did of that, the better they served our customers effectively because they felt empowered to do so. Of what we've done within our platform has come from our background, I suppose, of how we've always worked with our people to get best results. Yeah, so I was there 10 years at Eat with Ed, and then we've worked together on sort of separate projects since then for the last 7 or 8 years. And then in April 2024, he and I founded Talent Unlimited, initially based on an idea of how we could use AI to accelerate recruitment processes, to give a better service. We were doing some recruitment at the time in the hospitality sector, by the way, but how we could better use AI to give a better, more efficient, more cost-effective service to our customers. We then got talking to some people we're connected with and have worked with who are in the tech space, who got excited by what we were offering, what we were talking about, decided they wanted to invest and as well as offer us their tech team to help us build the MVP of our product. So we did that. A guy called James McLean joined us. He's now a co-founder and CTO, but he joined us on a sort of contract basis at first. And he led a team to build the initial prototype or MVP that we went to market with. And we were able to go live with paying customers in February of 2025. We're now live in about 14 different countries across multiple sectors, anything from sort of kitchen porters through to lawyers, engineers, you name it. Our platform is being used to really accelerate that first part of the recruitment process. So the screening of CVs, and the initial first stage interview. That's what our platform is based on. But I guess we'll talk a bit more about that in a second.
We will.
Just all time.
Thanks for the intro. So you said it's been about a year or so since you've had paying customers, and you just touched on what you guys focus on. So could you go into a bit more detail in terms of what a company benefits from working with you compared to doing it themselves or other solutions out there?
Yes, I mean, again, this comes back to our experience, I guess, of working, together. Ed and I have worked for like 60 years. You wouldn't tell, obviously, by looking at us, but 60 years recruiting. So in an internal recruitment environment, and for a couple of years after that, as an agency, which Ed and I ran. So we know inside and out the whole recruitment process and the pain points. And we've tried to address those. Now, we've addressed them, of course, from a recruiter perspective. So our platform is super efficient. So any candidate that applies through one of our links is automatically screened against the criteria that the recruiter has set up using our platform. So we use AI to read the job description, for example, to read the company culture, understand both of those, pull out the key sort of core skills and qualities required for that job. The recruiter just accepts and makes a couple of tweaks if they wish, and then that job goes live. So it's super efficient for the recruiter to screen every single applicant. But, actually doesn't have to do anything. Every single applicant is screened against the criteria the recruiter has set, using no keywords at all. So our AI agent, Sophie, she completely understands what the recruiter is looking for. She understands transferable skills. She understands adjacent skills, qualifications, everything. So you're not missing any candidate. There's no sort of people being eliminated by not having the exact keyword on their CV. Keywords don't exist. So that's the first step. So that's really important. And that means as a recruiter, you're not missing out on candidates. But if you were able to read every single CV yourself, you would see perhaps that a candidate has done X, Y, Z in a separate sector, but that is transferable to the sector you're recruiting in. But a keyword CV screener doesn't see that. It can only match words. So ours, we like to say, reads every CV like a human being would, and understands the sort of nuances within a CV. The next stage then is that every candidate over a certain threshold gets automatically invited to be interviewed. Our AI agent, Sophie, does that in a candidate's own time. So there's no scheduling of when that interview should take place. There's obviously a deadline, but any time before that deadline, they can do that interview. And after that interview, the candidate gets bespoke feedback and coaching tips. Okay, which, if you imagine the most likely outcome when a candidate gets interviewed or applies for a job currently is not to get interviewed at all, it's probably to be ignored. Whereas with our platform, anyone over a threshold gets automatically interviewed. Anyone below that threshold, the recruiter has to decide whether to progress them to interview manually or to reject them. So there's no AI making a decision on who progresses or not. It's always the recruiter, which is key. And of course, the feedback then that the candidate gets is bespoke to them. So it's not like sentences plucked from a database, which, jumbles together to try and give you something that kind of relates to what you said. But it's literally, Ed, when you talked about customer service, why don't you mention some of the examples of the things you've done in your career to bring that to life? That kind of thing. So really, really tangible, really useful for the candidate to go away and prepare for the next interview, whether that's with that same customer or that same recruiter, if you like, or any other interview they go to. So I guess to summarize that in sort of couple of bullet points, really efficient for a recruiter. Every candidate gets screened. Those that are eligible gets interviewed straight away. Those that aren't automatically eligible can be put forward. So no candidates missed. And then from a candidate perspective, never be ignored again. So even if you fail the first screening question, like do you have the right to work in whichever country the job is in, for example, even then you get a bespoke email explaining if you've been rejected, why. And then as you progress through the process, you'll get to the point where you're getting bespoke feedback and coaching tips. So I think we're quite unique in that we're quite equally balanced on both the recruiter experience and the candidate experience. And we believe that comes from our backgrounds of really being stuck in the weeds, I suppose, of recruiting thousands and thousands of people to work for us, not to work for somebody else, which is probably a difference.
Interesting. No, I appreciate you walking me through that. I had a quick question, which is that I think in the world of recruiting now, AI is becoming used by quite a lot of people on the screening side, but also on the application side. I think nowadays a lot of people, when they apply, they use AI to edit a CV or cover letter for each application. So you talked a lot about supporting the recruiter when it comes to their screening. There's probably a lot of solutions now that are helping the candidate essentially, rewrite a custom CV for each application, meaning that it's almost the AI is writing their CV, and then you have a technology that where the AI is reviewing the CV on behalf of the recruiter or the company. What are your thoughts on that dynamic where essentially it's just AI reviewing what an AI wrote? And is that going to make it more difficult for your technology to be able to screen good candidates if it's not a human writing the CV at the end of the day, it's an AI writing it?
That's a good question. I mean, firstly, I suppose the reason why our product exists in the first place is because of the huge increase in candidate volume. So now it's probably somewhere between 300 and 500 candidates per job that's advertised on average apply. That's in the UK. We've got customers in the UAE where it's 2,500. I mean, there's no way that a recruiter can read every single CV properly in that time and give everyone a fair chance of applying. So that's one problem. Of course, what happens then is the recruiters don't apply to candidates, and the bulk of candidates don't hear because a recruiter can't possibly reply to them or even screen their CV. So the candidate then finds other more sort of creative ways of applying for the role, which points to your point about, using AI to do so. So then they will try and find out what keywords the recruiter is looking for, make sure those keywords are inside their CV, whether they're written in proper visible ink or they're maybe whited out in the margins to try and get through. So that's a keyword issue. and that's a volume of candidate issue. What we do is, rather than just give recruiters the ability to use keyword CV screeners to do it, we're screening it as it's written. So of course, as long as the CV, our AI can only read what's in the CV and understand it. If that's completely fabricated, then we can't do much about that. But we can certainly understand what the candidate has written, if they've got qualifications, how those qualifications translate and match, even if they don't match exactly what the recruiter is looking for. So there might be some adjacent qualifications, that kind of thing. We can do all of that. A recruiter couldn't do that on their own, without volume. And a keyword CV screener couldn't do that either. So I think we're just really giving the recruiter the tools they need in order to manage the candidate volume that exists today, for all the reasons you mentioned, plus loads of other reasons as well. And at the same time, giving every candidate a fair shot of getting through to the next stage, which they wouldn't do if we weren't screening CVs with agentic AI rather than keyword.
Understood. I do like the approach that you mentioned regarding the balance and the supporting, giving the personalized feedback, which I think a lot of HR solutions maybe have a very narrow focus in terms of supporting recruiters, but don't capture that element. So that's a nice angle. And so on that, in terms of this whole space of recruiting, whether it's on the candidate side or the employee or hiring side, there's a lot of different aspects where AI is kind of, coming in to support. What's the goal for Talent Unlimited in terms of what your focus area is? Are there adjacencies that you're looking at to expand in terms of what you can do, or is your focus quite clearly on this problem that you're currently focusing on?
Both, really. I mean, to get market traction, it's definitely on that those first stages. That's where the biggest problem is. That's where we can work with any applicant tracking system, any HR system. So we're not, we can plug in everywhere. So that's better for us to get quick traction, I suppose. But at the same time, we've got a couple of other products that we're building. One is almost complete, which goes to how you screen it, how you search for candidates within a database. So if you've ever used a ATS system, it's very difficult to source candidates and match your criteria because you're using keywords to go back in. I'll give you an example. We've recruited chefs before. You're looking for a chef at the Japanese restaurant. So you say, you've got loads of chefs in your database of candidates you've already paid to advertise to get. You have them in your database. You then go into your ATS and you search maybe, Japanese chef. You might get 2 or 3 matches back that match what you're looking for. But others might say, well, this person's been on holiday to Japan, or they like eating in Japanese restaurants, but they're not what you're looking for. Whereas using agentic AI in a product that we're calling Talent Bank, you can go into our database and you can actually use the job description of the new role you're recruiting for to go and find those candidates that you've already paid for, already screened. You don't have to go and pay to advertise for them again, but they're there, and you can draw those out in a matter of seconds. So we're just piloting that. We're working with one customer on sort of early stages of them using our product. That would be huge. And then the other end of the scale, I suppose, is how we use AI for good. So we're already working with a charity called Recycling Lives, who help people who are leaving prison to get jobs. They're using our platform to enable people leaving prison to practice doing interviews, getting the feedback, going back, practice, reading through the feedback our AI has given them, going back to interview again and then doing better based on the feedback they've got. That's invaluable. So we're doing that there. We're hoping to move that into universities as well. We've got a couple of talks in progress there. And then, of course, you can go, I guess, further down that chain into helping candidates to interview like a careers coach for them, so they can interview for any job they want to go for and practice doing that. That's where we sort of see AI giving a benefit. Then, of course, you can monetize it on the corporate side when you sell out all those services to companies as well. But there's both angles, I suppose.
I want to now talk a bit more about that go-to-market and growth journey. You mentioned at the start, you're essentially just over a year past when you went live and you're revenue generating, I think you mentioned, and you're now, I think, 14 countries is what you mentioned. So what's been that journey in the last year? So how did you go from 0 to 1 and 1 to where you are now? What was it that led you to acquire the clients, and what's been your main strategy move so far?
The strategy might be overly generous, I suppose, but what we've done is like most startups, you sort of go to your network first. Who can you talk to is like a friendly lead. So we did that right back in the early days. That was our first our first customer that we tested our MVP was through that route. We then built out an affiliate network. So again, some people that we knew already, people who come from an HR background, maybe have their own HR consultancy or run HR tech businesses that are complementary to ours rather than competitive. So we started to build out affiliates that way. We then, since September of last year, have been working with Deloitte on their Operate to Scale program. And that's given us 4 business development managers, Deloitte people. 2 of those have been fully focused on building out more and more affiliates. So we've now about 45, 50 sort of affiliates who are specialists in their area, in the HR sector, have the right contacts. So that's been really helpful. So we get very warm intros. Why our the geographies we're operating in is so broad, because most people say to you, focus on one country, don't go broad. But we've gone broad because of who we've been introduced to, and our product can work anywhere. So why not? And from working with Deloitte, though, we've become a lot more focused on certain verticals. So a lot of business development is being done in areas like logistics, hotels, retail, manufacturing, where there's high volumes of applicants for roles and high churn as well. So that sort of formed our strategy there. So, and now we're in the process, we've just taken working with like a specialist CRO to help us refine our sales process as well and make sure it's not us kind of winging it and thinking we know what we're doing, but putting some proper process in place. Because obviously for us, it's initially we get an introduction to a customer. We want to demo to them as quickly as possible, onboard them as quickly as possible, quite naturally, I suppose. But we've learned, recently that it's probably better to be slower, spend a lot more time on the discovery, make sure we set proper sort of success criteria for a pilot, then go to the pilot, then review the pilot's outcomes, and then move to a rollout. Or actually, you might even say, well, actually, this isn't for you. Who knows? That's quite unnatural to do that as a startup, but you have to do that to make sure that you're making the most of every lead. But it's not something that comes naturally when you're sort of scrambling around for every potential sale. So I guess that's where we are at the moment. We're in this process of maintaining that founder-led sales focus and that sort of entrepreneurial spirit in that respect, but at the same time bringing in some structure and a bit more of a formulaic approach to selling.
Understood. I can imagine that's going to be a bit an interesting transition going from that. I understand what you mean, that very much startup way of thinking and just getting it done to having a lot more structure built in. So it's an interesting transition there. Good to hear that you've got a lot of focus on the Deloitte angle, which is bringing in the affiliates. What's been the channels that's actually been the most effective when it comes to bringing in? Has it been, cold calling or LinkedIn or email or which are the ways that have actually been the most successful in bringing on clients and helping grow the business?
Probably without having these statistics to hand, I would suppose it's probably the affiliates at the moment. So it's people who Ed and I know and have known for a long time, or someone we know knows. So it's like an indirect connection to start with. That's been the best, I suppose. We've had some really good introductions through Deloitte as well, particularly into affiliates and into their other partners in our sector, which has been really helpful. And will continue to be helpful. And then I guess our own network as well. So it's mixed, but certainly in the early days, it's been through people who've been introduced to us by people that we know. That's been the most beneficial.
What's the goal then for the next 12 months or so? Where do you want the business to be by then?
We want to grow our revenue number, our top line revenue number significantly as a priority, really. We then want to raise more funding later this year. So we just finished our sort of second round, pre-seed round, if you like. And then we want to rapidly expand. But we know it's a competitive market. We know we've got something quite different, but we're not, we also know that other people could do the same. So we really want to grow and get really decent traction as much as possible. So everything we're doing now really is fully focused on onboarding as many customers as possible, making as many partnerships as possible to accelerate that, getting the right affiliates to make sure we get the right introductions, and then I guess underlying all of that, streamlining our sales process so we can maximize every opportunity. That's the key part, really.
You've clearly had a lot of success with the referrals and the affiliate side. What channels or focus areas are you doubling down on now to get to where you want to get to the next year?
Affiliates we're still doubling down on. That's critical to us to keep doing that. Partnerships as well with sort of ATS providers, so people that we can bolt on our application too and grow that way. And then I guess with Talent Bank, introducing and seeking out potential partners for that, because that's quite unique. It will help any customer that has a big database of candidates. So really focusing on that, on those areas. And I guess doubling down on areas where sort of sectors where we know we've got proven traction, like hotel chains and so on, and where we've got customers already, and we can show quick returns on investment. But I mean, the reality is, Amaan, there's so many sectors that we could go after. I find it personally quite hard to say, right, let's niche down now, because at the same time, you're trying to balance that with going after as many opportunities as you can manage, because you know it's a competitive space.
I can very wholeheartedly relate to that feeling of do you niche down, do you keep it broad? So I know I can relate to that. But the fact that you're quite broad across countries already means you've had a lot of success in not niching down, which is
Yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah. Because our product speaks 62 different languages, and you know,
Oh,
again,
wow.
we were told not to bother doing that, but it was so easy. Well, I say James isn't here. I believe it was relatively easy to build like that. It did it very quickly anyway. So you kind of think, why not? If you can do it, if the same issues are prevalent everywhere, so why not make it as easy as possible for customers to use? I mean, the reality is most people are using our product in English, regardless of the geography, but you know, it's there and it can be used quickly and easily.
I think it's a double-edged sword when you try and not niche down, because the benefit is you have a wider market to go after. The challenge is that you have to be able to either be broad or figure out how to cater to lots of different people in terms of
Yeah,
their languages and stuff like that.
yeah.
What's been the way you've been able to approach that or cut through that so far?
Scrambling around probably, if I'm honest. So, you know, we're very hands-on, you know, we're very reactive to what customers need and want and listen, and are keen to make sure that stays the same, particularly as we grow and take on more heads. I was having this conversation with the other Ed this morning, you know, making sure that we don't lose that customer interaction as you bring in more people to help you grow revenue. Yes, we need to support the expertise, but at the same time, we need to be close to what our customers are saying. So we've been really keen on that, and we're very lucky to have a small but very reactive engineering team who, you know, are very quick to react to customers' demands and understand why they're demanding it and be open to that. So that's been really helpful. To answer your question, maybe it doesn't.
No, I think it does. It does.
Yeah, good.
It's interesting when I speak to founding teams and they mention how quickly the engineers are reacting. It's quite impressive how the speed of which teams can react now, like compared to a few years ago with AI within like power encoding. It's quite impressive
Yes.
how quickly things can
Yeah.
get shipped.
Yeah.
Ed, so obviously you've got quite ambitious growth goals. What would you say is the biggest hurdle or challenge to achieving what you need to achieve in the next year? And it's specifically in terms of growth.
I guess it's the sales cycle probably. Just really understanding how to accelerate that. So that you're not wasting opportunities, and we can definitely be more targeted on who we approach. And I think if we can get that sales cycle nailed, so we know that, yes, you're going through maybe 2 or 3 calls to get a customer to pilot, but you know, once they've piloted, because you've done all this pre-work, they're likely then to onboard as a paying customer. That's key. That's not my natural approach. My natural approach is to be much more, yes, we can do that. How quickly can we do it? But we need to do that. I think that will really help. I think that will mean then that collectively we can work alongside our sort of Deloitte partners and the team they've got. And if we all have that knowledge and understanding of these are the steps we have to go through to get our product to be piloted and bought, then that would be huge. So I think that's the challenge. And of course, then, as always, you have to convince investors that what you're doing is both wanted, needed, and achievable. We've done that so far. More case studies of customers who are onboarding. It just adds to that weight. I remember about a year ago when we started the round we just finished, I was struggling with time, thinking, well, how do I raise money at the same time as get customers? So for the first few weeks, I was just focusing on trying to get investment. I thought, hang on, this doesn't make any sense, because I can't tell the potential investors anything, because I've got nothing new to tell them. So I remember having a conversation with Ed and said, look, I'm just going to stop talking to investors. I'm not going to approach any investors. Let's just see what we can do to try and get more customers. And it was a light bulb moment for me. I'm sure it's not. I'm sure it's happened many times over everywhere else. But it was a few weeks after that we started to get more customer traction. And of course, then you've got something positive to talk to investors about, and then it started to snowball. So we're just going to keep doing the same. Let's focus fully on driving as much sales growth as we can, making sure we're learning all the time about how to make it smoother and quicker and better for customers and for us, obviously. And then that will drive the investment, I think.
I think my second last question, Ed, is it seems like you've had quite a long career in a lot of different areas, and this is quite a different environment now as a startup. From a personal perspective, what's it been like in the last couple of years working on the startup?
It is a little bit different. I mean, that said, when I joined Pratt, there were only 30 shops, 32 shops. So it was a bit like a startup then. It was, to hate to use the terms or work hard, play hard, but that was exactly what it was like. We were in the shops at 6 a.m. We were in the pub at 5, 3 or 4 nights a week. It was really good fun. It was very, very entrepreneurial. You could come up with new ideas one day and they'd be implemented the next. I guess 10 years later, that's probably, it probably became too corporate for me, if you like. Same thing happened to Eat. 60 shops when I started, very entrepreneurial. And inevitably, as it grows, it becomes more of a corporate environment. And then I spent 7 years, in startups. I've been on the board of several tech startups over the last 7 or 8 years. Started my own consultancy business, opened a couple of food concepts for clients from scratch. So I've worked in that startup environment. I haven't done the whole piece before until now, where I've had to raise money and build the business and everything else as well. But certainly I prefer this environment, which is less structured, certainly very unpolitical, and you can make decisions and do things quickly. It suits me better, really.
Ed, thanks very much for your time. I appreciate the insights you've shared across this conversation.
So thank
Final
you.
question is, if any of our listeners are interested in finding out more about yourself or about Talent Unlimited, where should they go to find you?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, or you can go to our website, which is www.talentunlimited.io, and you can contact us from there. But probably LinkedIn is, either of those two work, but they both come through to me anyway. So I'll be back in touch with you straight away.
Ed, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.